Hello friends. This week's ecstatic contemplative video is on unpacking shamanism. As you know, we're bringing together shamanism and mysticism, and in the following weeks I'll be presenting a number of premises that will fuse that link in your mind, so you'll be able to see that shamanism, or at least some shamanism and some mysticism, are one and the same. The only real difference is the cultural context. Okay, so to unpack shamanism, or what we know about shamanism, we should look first at the literature on shamanism to see who is a reliable reporter of shamanism and who isn't. And what we can do is we can look at popular literature and see who published or who wrote the most volumes on the subject of shamanism and who published the most books. And arguably that would be Carlos Castañeda, a Peruvian anthropologist who wrote roughly from 1960 until his death in the mid-90s. And he wrote published 12 volumes on the subject of Mesoamerican shamanism, and published something like 8 million books. So several million people have presumably read his work, and there's even a community of authors who continue his work in what he called Toltec wisdom. So beginning in the 80s, there was some literary analysis conducted on Castañeda's work. In fact, I read the first 4 volumes, and my literary analysis of his work was that it was canned. It was, in a sense, the first 3 volumes are almost the same story told over and over and over again, and for me it got boring, and there was no real new information provided. So that's my literary analysis of Castañeda's work. Others have gone into greater detail and looked at the timeline that's presented in Castañeda's books. As you may recall, Castañeda's work is presented as if it's journal entries of his relationship with a Yaqui medicine man or shaman by the name of Don Juan. Now, the analysis of the timeline, or the critical literary analysis, which would be looking at the timeline, shows that there are numerous breaks in the timeline as we look at all of the books that Castañeda wrote. And so the conclusion of the people who just looked at the timeline alone was that Castañeda was most probably writing fiction. And that was my conclusion as well, in that there was no really salient information provided about shamanism, and that the story seemed to be canned. Okay, additionally, as an anthropologist who studied southwestern archaeology and anthropology for 40 years, and in that same period also having studied mystics and shaman, I found nothing in Castañeda's work that would suggest that he had ever met a genuine shaman, because his work never revealed those kinds of salient details. Secondly, there's nothing in Castañeda's work that suggests that he ever met a Yaqui Indian. I'm born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. There's a Yaqui Indian reservation in Tucson. I've attended many of the Yaqui ritual cycle. I have had friends who are Yaqui Indians most of my life, and there was nothing about Castañeda's representation of Don Juan that suggested that he was a Yaqui Indian. So, and then that whole thing about Toltec wisdom that is in Castañeda's work. Well, the Toltec term Toltec is applied to a period of Mesoamerican archaeology. It really doesn't represent a single people. In fact, we archaeologists really don't know precisely who the Toltec people are. So anybody who claims that they are a Toltec Indian and privy to Toltec wisdom is somebody who's no doubt writing fiction. So we can conclude that we can throw out Castañeda's work because it just simply doesn't represent shamanism, and it's just fiction. We can also throw out the work of everybody who has carried forward that Castañeda premise of Toltec wisdom, as most probably they too are also writing fiction. So that eliminates most of the books that have been published on shamanism. Further, Castañeda actually got his BA, Master's, and PhD from University of California at Los Angeles in exchange for his first 3 books, which suggests that the faculty of UCLA really did not understand shamanism, or they would have seen that Castañeda's work was fiction. So we can also conclude that very probably the academic study of shamanism is probably deeply flawed and unreliable. Okay, friends, thank you very much. That concludes this week's contemplative and mystical dialogue, and I hope you all are maintaining a rigorous, self-aware, contemplative life, because I found that leads to the transformative aspects of being a mystic. Thank you, and have a great week.